Hi. So, welcome to our live. We're going to be talking about trust on I'm going to share this in here. Okay, good. Let me see if I can see the comments. I haven't done a Facebook Live very many times. So, I can write a comment. I don't need to do that. If you are here, it looks like we have a couple of people. So if you're here, why don't you type in the comments where you're from? No, I know what you can type in. Tell me what your role is on the IEP team. Are you a parent? Are you a related service professional? Are you a teacher, administrator? Oh, good. Okay, so I can see the comments. Thanks for doing that, Jackie. I really just wanted to know. It helps me to know my audience, but I also just wanted to know if they were working. Oh, good. Okay, I'm happy. So you are from ISEA. Isn't it incredible? ISEA is we're kind of waiting for people to hop on. It's called the Institute of Special Education Advocacy. Pete Wright and Pam Wright do it in conjunction with Wright's Law, in conjunction with the law school at the College of William and Mary, which has a special education advocacy clinic. And so their law students do a clinic where they do what I do. They do special education representation. I think they probably get limited licenses in order to represent families. And then, the ISEA supports that clinic, which is, so when you go, you feel like you're doing really good work too. You're doing something charitable for the special education community, but it is an incredible 40-hour training. It's just awesome. So I highly recommend that. The next session is at the end of July. Don't know if it'll be virtual or in person. I would imagine if it's in person, it'll also have a virtual option, but I would highly, highly recommend it. It was the first big special ed training that I did, and I have now done it 3 times. I did it once, and then I did it as an alum, and then I was on the faculty this year. So I really, really loved it. So it's just about 5 o'clock. And I really, if you are just joining, I would love to know your role on the IEP team. Are you a parent, administrator? Are you an advocate? Looks like Jackie's an advocate, experienced or new. Are you a related service professional, like a PT or an OT? Are you a grandparent, a tutor? Do you work at a disability organization? I would love to know where you are on the IEP team. So let's go ahead and get started because I don't want to take a whole lot of your time. I'm actually going to try to do a Facebook Live every single day this week. And the reason why is because I have had a few, a lot of conversations in my practice recently that I'm like, I call it a little ditty. I got a little ditty for that. I got a little ditty for that. I've got like a little paragraph that I can give you on these different things. And they all end up to be like, 10, 12 minutes. But people say, people say the same kinds of things. They have the same kinds of concerns. I'm going to click out of my email so you don't have to listen to it over here. They lots and lots of times the same issues come up. And so as the same issues come up, I have kind of developed little talks around them. I'm also a really involved student of my trade. I read a whole lot. I research a whole lot. I love to go to conferences. I'm like the weird attorney that likes to go to conferences. And so, some of the wisdom that I share, a lot of it isn't my own or from my own experiences. It is from things that I've read or things that I've heard other professionals say that then I can apply to the special education practice, the special education process, the way the team works, etc. So today I'm going to talk about this book. If you have not read this book, I highly recommend it. It's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. The author's name is Patrick Lencioni, Lencioni. It's a phenomenal book. I've read it a few times. This is actually a new copy because I couldn't find mine, and I was talking about it not too long ago, and I was like, I need that book. And I mean, it literally took me 2 nights. Now I've read it before, but it took me 2 nights, and you can see, I don't know if you can see, but I've got all these little pages marked and notes in it, etc., because it's just so good. So today the topic is this: so many people come to me and say, Ashley, I don't want to send that email, or I don't want to bring you to a meeting, or I don't want to bring an advocate to a meeting because I don't want to instill conflict into the meeting. I don't want to make it any worse. We're already really tense and we're already really, it's very adversarial. And so I don't want to make it any worse. And so I'm not going to send that email that you recommend. Or how can I send the email in a way that isn't going to make things worse? And so kind of the like sentences that I hear really often are, I don't want to hire an attorney or an advocate because I don't want to ruffle any feathers. Or I don't want to send that email because I don't want to make anybody mad, like I just said. Or the squeaky wheel kind of idea is like annoying. And I don't want to be annoying. I want people to do what they're supposed to do because they're supposed to do it. And so I don't want to be the squeaky wheel. That's not effective advocacy. And so I want, I always stop people when they say it and I'm like, okay, I'm going to knock your socks off for a second and you're not going to like this. So bear with me for a second while I say this. Conflict, yeah, Jackie hears it all the time. Conflict yields effective change. Conflict yields effective change. Now, I sometimes say our country is founded on conflict. Real good, productive discussion. Checks and balances, 3 branches of government, 2 different houses in our 2 different chambers of our legislation. You've got the House and the Senate. Stuff has to go through both. We've got the veto power. There's always this like tension. And oh my gosh, have you ever stopped to think that our country was made in the late 1700s and that stuff still for the most part works? Now, right now it's like not the best discussion to have, but in like a general sense of a term, that is just crazy to me that works. And the reason it works, and thank goodness our forefathers thought about this, is democracy is founded on that debate, on those checks and balances, on conflict. Now, conflict does not have to be adversarial. So I just talked about conflict for 20 seconds and your heart rates, if you wear your watch, your heart rate's like probably a little bit high. Like, whoa, I'm feeling like, no, I don't want conflict. I don't like conflict. I don't like being like, no, I disagree. But there is a way to gracefully disagree. And there is a foundation upon which a team has to be built in order for those discussions to be meaningful and to yield effective change. Because we are tasked as an IEP team to be a team, to collaborate. We have to collaborate. In fact, the word parent is in IDEA, it's in the federal law, over 450 times. And so when parents come to me and they say, I don't want to cause a big stink, I'm like, well, then you're not doing your job. Congress, when it wrote IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, it said we want parents to be a part of the team and to meaningfully participate in a meeting. Meaningfully participating in a meeting is not saying, And so we are charged to work as teams. And in order for teams to work well, we have to collaborate and sometimes we have to disagree. So we can't all just kind of sit there and be like, well, somebody else on the team is going to say that. Somebody else on the team is going to say that. And my role here is just to sit here and nod and say yes. Because as a parent, as an administrator, a teacher, related service professional, whoever you are at the meeting, your job is not just to sit there and say yes. Your job is to collaborate. And sometimes collaboration takes a difference of opinion, a difference of insight. So how do we do it gracefully? How do we advocate gracefully? That's what we want to know. So in this book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni, I always have to look because it is a lot of syllables, Patrick Lencioni. He has this kind of pyramid in the book, and it's like the way that teams work. And the foundation of all teamwork is, according to him, is trust. Now, why is trust so important? Because without trust, we have artificial harmony. He calls it artificial harmony. And oh my gosh, think about that in an IEP team. I get these meeting minutes. In Kentucky, they're called conference summaries. In Ohio, they're called PRO1s. It's your prior written notice form. That, you know, kind of the minutes from the meeting. And some states, they say they don't have them. But I get them, and it says, you know, parent rights were offered. We went through the IEP. The parents said they were concerned about potty training. Nobody had any questions, and we were done. That's artificial harmony, because parents come to me as an attorney. They go to my friends as advocates and attorneys. They talk at margarita time, and they're like, oh, the schools are doing terrible, and we aren't making any progress. And at the meetings, they say this, and they're so mean, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, then in the meeting, don't say, I don't have any questions, or I'm only concerned about potty training, because that is artificial harmony. And artificial harmony is inferior to open, constructive, ideological conflict. Open conflict, where we're just talking about it. It's not this like adversarial thing. It's open. It's ideological, and it's constructive. It's constructive criticism, where we're saying, I respectfully disagree. So this artificial harmony kind of involves a lot of tension, right? And think about it at work, when like you really want to say something, but you can't say it, and you're like, I want to say it. There's this tension. And sometimes in meetings, you can cut, in IEP meetings, you can cut the tension with a knife. And I'll just say, I see, hang on, I'm looking at you and you don't look happy. What do you want to say? Or, we made him mad. I'm sorry I made you mad. I want to hear what you have to say. And so sometimes we have to kind of pull it out, because that artificial harmony yields the tension that makes things feel adversarial. And so if we don't have artificial harmony, and we have real, true collaboration, which is based on trust, then we won't have that issue. So our goal is to engage in constructive discord. Constructive discord, not just discord, like siblings fighting, or like a husband and wife that know how to trigger one another. Not that. We want constructive discord that is yielding effective change, that is getting us to some kind of resolution. And so what we are supposed to do is we are supposed to collaborate. We want constructive discussion without collateral damage. And that's what people are coming to me saying. I don't want the collateral damage. I don't want there to be some kind of repercussion as a result of the fact that I said, hey, maybe I want more minutes. Or could I have a talker, an AAC device? Or I really want inclusion. We can't say, oh, I really want that, and then start some conflict. We have to do it in an effective way, and it's possible. So I've got 4 ideas. The first one is commitment. Every single person on the team needs to buy in. Every single person. The principal, the meeting chair, all the other administrators, the special ed director, the teachers, everybody needs that buy-in. How do you get buy-in? Empathy. Empathy. A humongous key to special education is empathy. Put in the comments, how do you provoke empathy at a meeting? One of the strongest ways that I do is with that parent interest statement. I've got a download on my website that you can look at, parent interest statement, future planning statement, really describing what does dyslexia look like in this child? What does executive function disorder and executive planning dysfunction look like in this child, in my child? What does ADHD look like in Jack Barlow? What does that look like? How else do you provoke empathy in a meeting? There's lots and lots of ways, but when I did an Instagram poll today, I said, do you feel comfortable being vulnerable in the meeting? And do you know how many people felt vulnerable in a meeting? Not very many. 63% of people felt nervous, felt worried about being vulnerable in a meeting, which is really significant. We've got to have that vulnerability in order to talk about empathy. Now, another way to do that is kind of this interest-based negotiation. idea that I talk about a lot, where we look at stuff from a different perspective. So my husband randomly today, as I was leaving, Griffin's in the, my older son is in the Pfizer COVID vaccine trial. So I'm leaving like to take him, and I had like thousands of things going on. And he was like, oh, at work, we just had this thing about perspective. And it was like, so one lady's walking a dog, and a lady walks up to the dog, and she like, her world turns like fluffy because she's like, oh, there's a dog, and I'm like ready to pet the dog, and I'm so excited, I'm gonna cuddle the dog. And then this guy's walking up from the other direction, and his whole world turns black. And he's like afraid of the dog, and the picture of the dog is like the dog attacking him, right? Everybody comes into life with their own experiences, their own different baggage, whatever it is. Their experiences and your baseline experiences help to form your opinions and your values. And so we've got to look at things from other people's perspective, because we see a dog, one person might be scared to death, another person might be like, oh, I can't wait to cuddle that sweet little angel of a dog. And none of that is reasonable or rational based on the dog, because nobody knows the dog, right? So we have to look at things from different perspectives. How do we do that in an IEP meeting? We come from the other direction and we talk about how things affect the child. We keep it child-centered, and we talk really about things from the child's perspective, the way the child is experiencing things. So if you've got a transition meeting and the child says, oh, I want to work at a retail place, but the child has autism and interpersonal skills are not great, the child doesn't do well with conflict, and they want to work at, you know, like a place where people are going to be returning stuff a lot or something. Well, that might not be a good fit, because we might not have the interpersonal skills to work in that kind of setting. And so what we need to do as advocates for the child is to explain that from their perspective. Go in and talk about concrete examples constructively where that didn't happen. So you bring the constructive, objective information in. Number 2, encourage discussion without a winner. Nobody has to feel like they won an IEP meeting. Nobody has to feel like they got everything they wanted or they got everything they didn't want. Reasonable people, this is a quote from the book, reasonable people don't have to get their way in a discussion. They just need to be heard and to know that their input was considered and responded to. And so sometimes I say things in meetings like, well, this is just my 2 cents, or I encourage my parents to say it. This is just my 2 cents. I'm not saying yes or no, but I just want to say this, and I want everybody to consider it, and then I want for you, Mr. Psychologist, to weigh in on that. Or like, I'm worried about this. PT, do you have anything to say about this concern about gross motor? Right? So we are explaining our worries, our concerns. We're encouraging discussion, but we're doing it without saying, I'm not worried about this and therefore we can't do it. We're saying, here's my concerns. Can somebody address it? Or you said this, and I'm not saying no to it, but I do want to say how some hesitations I have about it, or a couple of disagreements that I have about it, and let you kind of then address my concerns as well, without a winner or loser. Not like, nope, we're not doing that. We have to have healthy discussion. So one thing that I like to do, though, is I like to remind people that we use the experts on the team. We use the PT to talk about gross motor. We use the OT to talk about sensory and fine motor and visual perception and all the OT stuff. We use the administrator to talk about administrative stuff. But we also know that everybody has their own other experiences as well. And so we don't kind of peg people into those holes. We let people weigh in on other areas that might not be their specific area of expertise, but we all kind of collaborate. We all consider change. We all push one another. We all ask questions so that as a team, we get that buy-in that we talked about, because we need the buy-in in order to make decisions together. Now, third thing, we have to be vulnerable. Remember, 63% of you said, I don't feel comfortable being vulnerable. And that is really significant. I don't feel comfortable being vulnerable at the IEP team. Here's the deal. conflict happens because people feel like they don't want to let go. They've got something and they don't want everybody to know that they're nervous about it. I'm scared to death of fill in the blank. You know, I do a lot of cases in inclusion, and there are parents that say to me, Ashley, I know this is ridiculous, but I'm scared to death. My Griffin's playing like a video game or something downstairs. I'm certain you can hear him yelling. I am scared to death that if we don't get an inclusive IEP in kindergarten, that means we're not going to get an inclusive IEP in high school. And my district has this really crazy thing in high school, and I'm worried that we're going to be in this self-contained classroom. And so I just see like kindergarten, high school, and I don't see anything in between. And so if you go into a meeting and say, this is my concern, then the district can address it. The other people on the team can address that concern. And so we then yield discussion. And other people on the team might be thinking about some other issue. Oh, she just thinks blah, blah, blah. And if you aren't ever vulnerable and you don't ever discuss your vulnerabilities, they might get stuck in that. And they might be thinking something about you that isn't true at all. I oftentimes find myself having to say, we're not thinking about due process. Nobody has talked about due process because they see a lawyer, a lady with JD behind her name, and they're like, oh, they're trying to sue us. And I'm like, actually, I haven't even talked to my client about due process. That's not our contract, you know, but I have to say it out loud and have that vulnerability, which really doesn't peg anybody into any corner, doesn't do anything like that. But it's just this vulnerability of, we're really trying to work this out, and we're frustrated that you think that that something different about us. So what Patrick Lencioni calls it is genuinely open. Be that open book. We're here for the child. We are here to make things better for the child. And so if we can say, here's my vulnerability, here is my worry about the child, here's my real opinion about this, here is me being real about this child, not protecting anything. This isn't about me. We're gonna get better results. So I like to say, show your desires, show your lack of knowledge. Who cares? I ask questions all the time. I don't know. Just tell me what it is from your perspective, because I am, Kentucky and Ohio don't allow me to say I'm an expert in special education, but I know a lot about special education. I don't know it all. I ask questions about special education all the time. I called the Kentucky Department of Education the last week of December and had my world rocked on something that they told me. I was like, really? Who knew? But I asked a question, and I was vulnerable and saying, I don't know the answer, and that's okay. There's a confidence that comes with that. Share your fears. Admit if you have an interpersonal thing. You know, I oftentimes encourage clients to say, I laugh when I'm nervous, or I am so, like I said one time in a meeting, I don't get mad. This was my own meeting. It was my only bad meeting. And I was so uncomfortable with the feeling of anger that I said, I apologize. I don't get mad very often. Mad is not something I feel very well. And so I don't know why I'm acting this way either. I'm mad and like, I'm just going to be quiet over here and sniffle into this tissue, because mad isn't something that I feel very often. And I was vulnerable about that because I didn't want people to carry with them this blubbering, chatty, uncontrolled version of me in the future. Ask for help. All of those things show that vulnerability. Then the fourth thing is relentless optimism. So the question that I posed on this one on Instagram was this: do you ever get discouraged? Whoops, I lost it. 1 second. The question is, sorry, I had it up. Do you ever get discouraged with the time that it takes for your IEP team to start to collaborate? And 75% of you said yes. And here's what you need to know. It takes time to develop that kind of vulnerability-based trust. And so the quote from this book, which I think is awesome, is, vulnerability-based trust cannot be achieved overnight. It requires shared experiences over time, multiple instances of follow-through and credibility, and in-depth understanding of the unique attributes of the team members. It's very relationship-based and it's very action-based. Say you're going to do something and do it. Don't exaggerate things. Show up. Be true to yourself. All of that is true, but it takes time. If you don't like somebody, if you're nervous about somebody, you aren't just going to be like, oh, okay, well, she said she was nervous about this, so I'm going to like her now. It takes a second, and that's okay. But be a leader in that optimism. Be a leader in that vulnerability. Be a leader in the effective change, that collaboration, that constructive discord. Be a leader in it, and over time, it will start to turn around. I call it relentless optimism. You just have to believe that you can turn it around. And time and time again, I coach families through it, and it works. I promise you, it works. So that's my key to taking the conflict out of meetings in the adversarial way and changing it to constructive discord. Remember, conflict yields effective change. I will stay on in case there's any questions. So just if you have a question, I'll stay on for like 30 seconds or something and see if there are any questions. And if there are, I will be happy to address them. If there aren't, I will say good night. We're going to meet again tomorrow night. I don't have what we're going to talk about. I'll put it on social media. Hopefully another Facebook or another video game explosion downstairs. I will put the topics on sometime tonight, probably, but Jackie said it was helpful. Thank you, Jackie. I'm happy to help. This is like my secret sauce, like this relentless optimism, getting people to collaborate, the teamwork. This is what I study. This is what I read. This is what I love. So, okay, doesn't look like there's a whole lot of additional questions. So join me tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. If you're interested in the Special Education and Advocacy Lab, it is now open for registration. 10-week online training course in all things special ed. We start with a very strong legal foundation, just the legal basics. We go through the IEP document. We talk about progress monitoring. We talk about how to implement an IEP. And then we actually go all the way through the due process, the litigation part of it. And the reason why is because I like for my clients to say, Pete Wright says this all the time, the best way to stay out of court is to always prepare like you're going to court. And so I like for my students to see what it looks like in due process and how to prepare for due process, because if you're prepared for it, then Rachel put the link for the lab in the comments here. So if you're interested in joining us, please do. But we go all the way through from start to finish with legal basics, all the way through dispute resolution and due process. I'd love to have you there. And I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night.